Welcome to English 4E. This is grade 12 English workplace level. Today is term 1B, class 9, and we're going to be working on assignments key question 15 and 16 and talking about semicolons, colons, and writing. It is November 25th, Tuesday, 2025, and this is Jillian Percy. All right, here are all the ways to contact us. The studio number is 1-800-465-7144. Keep in mind if you call and talk to me while I'm on the studio line, then you also will be on the radio just like I am. Office number 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. If I am not there, just leave me a message. Email jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca or jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. If you want to reach out to me on Facebook, I am capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA, so G Percy Wassa. When you send a friend request, it doesn't ding my email, but a message will. So make sure to send me a message as well, and I will get back to you. Let me know what course you're in, because I teach 4 different courses. And if there's a specific assignment that you're wanting help with, let me know what it is so that when I enter the chat, I've already had a chance to kind of look things up, because with 4 different courses, I don't always remember the exact information about every single assignment, okay? All these classes are recorded and posted on YouTube to be watched later on. There is the school channel, which is called Wassa Distance Education YouTube, and there is my teacher channel, which is G Percy Wassa. Either one will have a playlist called 2526 English 4E, and you can look that up. If you have a slightly older copy, you might look at the 2425 English 4E. But if that happens, I would also suggest giving me a phone call or an email and getting a more current copy, okay? All right, handing in assignments. Whenever you hand in assignments, you don't normally hand them in to me. You hand them to our student work at nnec.on.ca email. That's where everybody's assignments go. That way the secretary logs that you submitted the work, and if someone else were to take over the course, they would be able to still locate it. Whereas if you send it only to me, then no one else can access it. Please include your full name, your course name, the assignment name and number physically right on the page, and if possible, in the subject line of your email if you're sending it by email. If in a writing assignment asks you for a rough draft, a good draft, a revised draft, whatever it is, label it, okay? Don't assume, well, she'll be able to tell because this one's messier. I don't want to have to guess because a lot of times they may be worth completely different marks, and I often use different rubrics to mark them. So, there are multiple ways to hand in stuff. If you have a learning center in your community, you can talk to the DEC, that's the person that runs it, and ask them to scan your assignments and then email them over to me. Hang on to your originals because you will need them later. You can also fax it in to me at 1-800-463-7852. That's in Ontario, or 1-877-990-2023. That is if you are in the rest of Canada. Let me know that you're going to do that. I'll turn on the fax machine because we keep it in sleep mode. If you live in town, you're welcome to bring the assignments to the office. You can also do your work on the computer and email it to me. That's a really common way. Some people like to work with Google Docs and then share things with me. And that's fine, but remember to include me as somebody who can view and edit it. If you don't allow me as somebody who can edit it, I can't print it off. And for whatever reason, I'm old school enough, I need to have a physical copy to be able to mark it. I can't just mark the computer screen. I promise I won't actually touch your work or edit it in any way. That would be very disrespectful. If you are doing your work by handwriting, a lot of people will take a picture of it and send me the pictures in Facebook or in email. Only take a picture of one page at a time. More than that, and I find I just can't read the writing. It's too small. Even when I zoom in, it gets all pixelated. Check that your writing isn't blurry. Don't tilt the phone at a weird angle while you're taking the photograph, or it's very tricky to read because one part will be really small, one part will be really big. And then send it as an attachment rather than just sharing it as an email. For whatever reason, it's much easier for me to manipulate and play around and make it easy to print. If you think you're going to be taking a lot of photographs, I really suggest downloading Adobe Scan. It takes way better pictures. And the reason is because it will fade the background to very white, and it will turn all the writing into very dark black. So especially if you use pencil, it just produces a higher quality print that is way easier for me to read. Okay, so here's our quick plan. We should hopefully get through assignment 15-16 today, and then I think maybe only 17 and 18. I was hoping for 19, but I'm taking a look at it and there's a lot there. Lesson 4. Lesson 4 includes assignments 15 to 19. These are all the learning goals for lesson 4. Keep in mind there's 4 different assignments. Not every single assignment will meet one of these learning goals, but all together they will meet these goals. So first of all, we're trying to make sure that students can use semicolons to join 2 sentences that are related in concept. We also want students to be able to write complete sentences that communicate their meaning and correctly use conventions of punctuation and grammar. Here I switched over. Students will describe the topic, purpose, and audience for a journal or Facebook post that you create. Produce the journal or Facebook post for a stated audience and purpose using appropriate techniques suitable to that particular format. Students can use the text features of a thesaurus or a dictionary to help them determine meanings, synonyms, and antonyms and use them correctly in sentences. Students will automatically understand familiar words in their reading. Students can use a variety of strategies, including using reference books like a thesaurus, in order to expand and build on their vocabulary. Students will use their knowledge of common homophones in order to help them recognize common spelling errors. Students will also proofread their writing using a variety of guidelines, such as checklists, to identify and correct common errors in spelling, punctuation, capitalization, and grammar. All right, so we finished up key question 14 last time, and we're beginning work on 15. We should be on activity 5 in your unit. All right, so the description unit says, the semicolon. As described earlier, a semicolon is another form of punctuation that can be used in sentences. It can join 2 main clauses in a compound sentence and can take the place of the following conjunctions: and, but, however, for, oh, or, so, and yet. I don't know about the word forever, however, but it says that. I'll go with it. Some examples. On Tuesday, Lori and her friends will be rehearsing their play Friends and setting up the stage for presentation. Semicolon. It will be an important day. Patrick has been practicing for his literacy test. Semicolon. It is scheduled for next Thursday. Now, in these 2 examples, I wanted to point out, remember how we've talked about pronouns? It needs to be really clear what they are referring to. I think for these particular sentences, one reason why they've joined them with a semicolon is because they want to make sure that that very vague pronoun, it, that you can tell what it is referring to. So in both of those, Patrick's been practicing for his literacy test. It is referring to the words right before, the literacy test. Same thing for setting up the stage for the presentation. It is referring back to the presentation. So using the semicolon kind of makes it a little bit more obvious what the antecedent is. So I found this little comic on semicolons, which I thought was really cute because it's not often you find grammar comics. Anyways, the colon is saying, why are you crying? And the semicolon is saying, nobody understands me. So don't worry if you aren't sure how to use them. They are a source of confusion. I definitely had to look them up to make sure. The thing is, I want you to be aware of them because they do occur in reading stuff, and you may want to use them for writing. We're going to practice using them in writing. After this, you don't necessarily have to use them all the time. If you think, oh my gosh, I hate these, the world will not end if you write papers without semicolons, okay? But it's good to know what they mean. So, how and when do we use semicolons in a sentence? It has 3 general uses. First of all, as a super comma. If there's a series of items in a list that already has commas between them, a semicolon will get used to make the separations between them more obvious. To join 2 sentences, which we just talked about, that have an important connection between them that you want to emphasize, or to join 2 sentences together when you're using a conjunctive adverb. All right, so we're going to go into each one of those a little bit more in detail. So, hopefully you remember that we use commas to separate items in a list. So for example, if I said, I want you to buy flour, comma, milk, comma, bread, comma, eggs, comma, and steak at the store. Otherwise, it sounds like I've got one giant thing that's a flour, milk, bread, egg, right? It ends up sounding like a string of adjectives describing the egg. It helps make it clear to the reader that it's a list of different items. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. But there are certain times where you use commas to separate items. Like, for example, we use commas to separate the day and the month and the year in a date. And we also use commas to separate the city and the province and the country if it's there as well. If you had a whole list of dates or a whole list of places, because you're already putting commas between the day, month, year, or the city, province, country, adding another comma between them gets confusing. It's not actually helpful. So in that case, you would use semicolons as a type of like extra comma, super comma. So here's how that would look. The concert tour this month will be in major cities across Canada. Toronto, comma, Ontario, semicolon. Winnipeg, comma, Manitoba, semicolon. Montreal, comma, Quebec, semicolon. And Regina, Saskatchewan. Now, there's no need there for a semicolon because the sentence is ended. And then you have the same kind of idea when you have a string of dates. I have several doctor's appointments in the next few months. Tuesday, comma, March 11th, semicolon. Wednesday, March 26th, semicolon. Friday, April 11th, semicolon. And Monday, April 28th. All right, this is the big one. Joining two sentences that are related to each other by an important concept that you want to emphasize, okay? Because this is an unusual punctuation, it kind of calls attention to itself. So if you're using it, it's usually for a special reason. Does that make sense? Now, keep in mind that when you're doing this, each sentence that you're joining must be capable of standing on its own, which means it must have its own subject, it must have its own verb, and it must express a complete thought. So both sides have to do that. Sometimes you may want to emphasize a connection or keep yourself from repeating a noun over and over again. So here are some examples I've got. Good grades are integral to student success, semicolon. A strong support network is always important. Sorry, also important. So though they aren't referencing good grades again, they are kind of keen around the idea that both of these things will help with student success. Next one. Winter always seems a sad and bleak season to me, semicolon. My daughter's death in December casts a shadow across it all. So here, the first sentence is giving you like an observation, and the second sentence is giving you a reason. All right. Now, there's one more. This is kind of an advanced usage of semicolons. You do not have to practice this, but you will definitely see it in writing, and I want you to be aware of it so that you're aware of how it looks when you're reading things. So, sometimes you're joining two sentences together using conjunctive adverbs. These are different than the regular adverbs. Usually adverbs are describing a verb, an adverb, or an adjective. These ones are special kind of adverbs that are sort of acting a little bit like a conjunction. So that's why they're called conjunctive adverbs. They connect things. Sometimes we want to make a relationship between two sentences really clear, but there is no coordinating conjunction that expresses the right relationship or the right connection. So in these cases, we often use a conjunctive adverb to start the second sentence. But we place a semicolon at the end of the first sentence to show that it has ended and we've started a new idea. Let me show you how this might look. I wanted to go to the dance very badly, semicolon. However, comma, my father had forbidden me from leaving the house. So let's look at this one sort of in depth here. Okay, so here is where the first sentence ends. Because I'm wanting to join it, and I'm not using a period, I'm using a semicolon. Here is the conjunctive adverb, and it's joining the two things together. But it's not considered, however, isn't considered strong enough to join it all by itself, okay? That's why it's got the semicolon. It's still kind of a transition phrase, so we still have the comma afterwards, and then we have our whole complete sentence. Let's look at the next example. The March fiscal year is almost over, semicolon. Therefore, comma, any new expenditures will not be purchased until April when the new budget begins. Okay, so again, this first sentence is giving you a statement, and therefore is kind of giving you, explaining the reason for it, right? Now, here is a list of common conjunctive adverbs. They are used a lot in academic writing. They sound a bit formal or maybe even pretentious if you were talking this way, but it's really good for your writing, okay? Before we get into them, I want to point out a lot of these can also act as a regular adverb, and in that point they won't need a semicolon because they're not joining a sentence together. The other thing is sometimes we might use one of these phrases to start a sentence all by itself rather than to join it to a new one, in which case we would just use the phrase and then a comma and then write our main sentence. For example, next, comma, mix in the raisins. Now, there are more than just these. These are the ones that were like most common in all the lists I saw, but there just isn't room for every single one. So we've got things like also, accordingly, again, anyway, besides, consequently, conversely, certainly, contrarily, further, furthermore, finally, hence, however, indeed, incidentally, likewise, meanwhile, moreover, namely, nevertheless, next, nonetheless, now, otherwise, still, similarly, specifically, regardless, subsequently, then, thereafter, therefore, thus, and undoubtedly. Now, if you're looking at these and you're not sure what they mean, be sure to look them up in a dictionary before you use one, okay? That way you won't get them mixed up. So for example, nevertheless and nonetheless, those are really similar sounding. What is the difference in their meaning? Before I use one in a sentence, I would want to make sure I had looked it up to make sure I knew what it meant. Same thing between further and furthermore. All right. So here are some more examples. Again, it has to be two main clauses. I wanted to go semicolon, however, I was too busy. The check was for more than the balance, semicolon, consequently, it bounced. These things really happened, semicolon, otherwise I wouldn't have claimed to have seen them. Now, why is there a comma after this conjunctive adverb? How does this relate to what we've already been doing? Remember when we use these kinds of transition phrases at the beginning of a sentence, we put a little comma after to kind of show, hey, this isn't the main part of the sentence. Here on the other side of it is the main part of the sentence. So we have the comma there for the exact same reason. Okay? In these sentences, the conjunctive adverb, it looks a lot like a coordinate conjunction, and, or, so, but it's not considered as strong as a coordinate conjunction. So the comma is used to set off the adverb from the main clause. Okay, so we're going to practice adding semicolons to these sentences. He had waited all his life for this moment. His triumph was finally here. Okay, so there's two sentences here. Where does the first one end? He had waited all his life for this moment. To me, that's where it sounds like the end is, and then I'd put a little semicolon. His triumph was finally here. That sounds right. We are touring in several cities: Detroit, Michigan, Chicago, Illinois, Charleston, South Carolina, and Cincinnati, Ohio. So hopefully you can see the pattern here. Detroit, Michigan, city State, semicolon. Sorry, make it a little bit darker there. Chicago, Illinois. City, state, semicolon. Charleston, South Carolina. City, state, semicolon. And Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm not doing one at the end because the sentence is over and I just use a period there. Being an Olympian requires total dedication. Every moment is scheduled and planned in order to get the most out of every day. So that would be a very long sentence. That would be kind of a run-on sentence if I tried to do it. It's actually two sentences squashed together. Where does the first sentence end? Being an Olympian requires total dedication every moment. Now, if I put it there, then my next sentence starts with is, and we don't generally do that in English. So is a verb, it needs a subject in ahead of it. So I would say every moment is the beginning of the second sentence. That means dedication is the last word in the first one, so I put a semicolon there. Every moment is scheduled and planned in order to get the most out of every day. Yeah, that works. She looked at her calendar to see what was available. Monday, September 18th, Tuesday, October 17th, Monday, October 30th, and Tuesday, November 14th were all that were left. Okay, so this is just like the city-state. We've got the day and then the month with the date. There isn't, there's no comma between the month and the date. I don't particularly know why. So it doesn't need, just doesn't need it. Monday, September 18th, though, I'm going to put a semicolon there to make it clear that the next part is a whole new date. Tuesday, October 17th, semicolon. Monday, October 30th, semicolon. And Tuesday, November 14th. Now, should I put a semicolon here or not? I'm going to say no, because there's no more things left in the list. Now I've gone back to the main sentence. The sales reports were sent to me 2 weeks late. Consequently, this analysis was delayed as well. All right, so this is a tricky one. The sales reports were sent to me 2 weeks late. That's clearly the end of the first sentence. So I'm going to put my semicolon there. Now, consequently is one of those conjunctive adverbs, and I put a comma after it. And then I have the main sentence. This analysis was delayed as well. Okay? Now, I'm going to kind of quickly show you. Write 5 sentences of your own to show that you understand the semicolon. Hint, try to include some of the different ways it can be used. For example, to connect two related sentences, to separate items in a list, to use a conjunctive adverb. Now, I put this kind of here as a way to practice it. Keep in mind, I'm aware of what I've written, so you can't use mine, but it can give you some ideas for how to write some of your own, okay? Because sometimes people find this one either really easy or really hard. I never know for sure which way it's going to go, okay? If you've never really used semicolons at all ever, then this can be a little bit of a tricky exercise. Keep in mind, it's not worth a whole lot of marks. So even if it didn't go really well, it's not the end of the world, right? It's okay. As a super comma for dates. Okay, so I want to put a string of dates here. Why would I have a string of dates? Could be birthdays, concerts, due dates. I don't know. I'm going to go with birthdays. Okay. I'm going to say my kids' birthdays. Birthdays are. Birthdays are. Why is it keeps wanting to kind of slide over? Why is it doing that? Oh, okay. Hang on a second. There we go. Let's see. Monday, October 20th. Hang on a second. Monday, October 20th, semicolon, right? Because I already have a comma between the Monday and the October 20th. Let me think what else. Thursday, May 15th, semicolon, and Sunday, let me think here, July 23rd, period. No semicolon because sentence is over. Now, I could do the exact same thing with locations, okay? Why would I have a list of locations? Okay, so the example sentences, we did a concert. You could be doing a camping trip. You could be going on business trips. Let's see, maybe your favorite singer is going to different locations. Maybe your favorite sports team is going to different locations. Anything where there's a string of locations would work for that kind of thing. All right, I'm not going to do one for that because I don't want to steal ideas that might help for other people. To join sentences that have a connected idea or theme. I feel like this is the one that's kind of harder for sometimes people to do. Let's see, I'm going to grab a little piece of text here. Okay, what could my connected idea be? I'm going to talk about fall. Just because I'm already missing it. All right, let's see. Fall is my favorite. Oops, sorry, bad spelling. Favorite season, semicolon. Now, I'm talking about fall or possibly seasons. So my next sentence should be connected to fall or to the idea of like why it's my favorite season. Okay. So fall is my favorite season. The bright colors, the holidays, and the end of summer bugs delight me. All right, that maybe sounds a little bit pretentious, but oh well. I'm not worried about that. Right? So if I didn't have that first sentence there, fall is my favorite season, the next sentence might not make a lot of sense. So that's a time where joining the two sentences is really useful because I could explain it, but it'd be kind of clunky. This way I don't have to explain it. The semicolon is just telling the reader, hey, these two ideas are connected. This list of things she's talking about is connected to fall. Okay? Then I can also do the same thing when I'm joining things with a conjunctive adverb. Okay? This is really common in academic writing. If you do longer pieces in this course, these can be really helpful to you to do. And if you're not sure, you can always go back and look at the list of conjunctive adverbs to give yourself some ideas, okay? Hang on. So a lot of these are showing relationships, just like conjunctions do. These ones show relationships as well. So consequently, that is showing you a result. So is hence. However is showing you contrast. So is conversely. So is contrarily. Let me think here. Meanwhile is showing you time. One thing's happening at another time. Subsequently is showing you things happening in order or possibly cause and effect. Same thing with then. Same thing with thereafter. Those are all time ones, okay? Specifically is kind of one giving you an example. Is there any other ones like that? That's the first one that comes to mind. So when you're looking at these, think about what type of relationship they're implying, and that will give you some ideas for what to write. I feel like the time ones are really easy to use, so I might leave those for you guys and think about, I'm going to use conversely. How about that? Let's see. Now that I'm thinking that, my brain has gone dead. But I like to put myself on the spot because I want you to know that I don't necessarily find this easy either, but that also it's easy to come over eventually, okay? I'm just going to write, if I can't use conversely, I'll pick a different one. Again, I feel like those time ones are really good. Let's see. All right. Uh, my dad was building a boat in the garage, semicolon. Meanwhile, comma, Mom was making a feast in the kitchen. So, how are those connected? I'm kind of telling you what both my parents are doing at the same time. All right, so we've already read the question. Success criteria. Half a mark for using capitals and end punctuation, that's periods, question marks, exclamation points, in each overall sentence. Remember that you do not need a capital letter on the second clause after that semicolon. So let me take a quick look here. Some people, the semicolon kind of looks like a period, and so they suddenly go, oh, well, maybe I should make that as a capital letter. But if you do that, I'm going to mark it wrong because it doesn't need a capital letter in the middle of a sentence, right? We only put a capital letter at the beginning of the sentence or for like names and titles and things like that. Then we have half a mark for correctly using, sorry, something disappeared there, correctly using a semicolon to join two independent clauses. By the way, I just wanted to I realize I'm going back and forth between semicolon and with a hyphen and semicolon without one, and the reason is my brain wants to use semicolon with the hyphen. That's kind of how I was taught, but Google keeps wanting to correct it and take the hyphen out. I don't know if it's a Canadian versus American thing or if it's an old person versus a young person thing, but it drives me crazy not to have it, so I keep sticking them back in. So my apologies that it's going back and forth. Obviously, I will take either since I seem to be confused on the matter as well. Okay, do you really have to use semicolons? I mean, for this exercise, right? Some writers talk about how much they hate them and that they will never use them in their writing because they feel like they're pretentious or overdone or old-fashioned. They were used a lot more in the past when authors tended to create much longer sentences in their work. I was reading one where I swear like half the page was one sentence joined together by multiple semicolons. But in modern times, we tend towards shorter sentences. I think because they're easier to understand. Because they're shorter, they don't necessarily need semicolons, okay? Now, I did want to kind of show you somebody going against that. This is from a writer called Claire Messaud. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And she is arguing about it, but at the same time as she's arguing about it, she is showing you how she uses semicolons and why she likes them, okay? So I'm going to try to read it to show you how she's using the semicolon. Keep in mind, the semicolon is kind of like a long comma. So when you're reading, you have a comma, there's a tiny little pause. A period is a big pause. A semicolon is kind of a medium pause to me, okay? So in compiling the sentence, efficiency, or more precisely, precision, is important. Capacity is important, and clarity is important. Now, between each of those, she's put a semicolon. This kind of writer, at least, doesn't think in little stoppered declarative sentences. It isn't like that. Not really ever. Perhaps for some people, but not for us. And all of those are really tiny little short sentences with periods. For those of us whose thoughts digress, for whom unexpected juxtapositions are exhilarating rather than tiresome, who aim, if always inadequately, to convey life's experience in some semblance of its complexity. For such writers, the semicolon is invaluable. So this is one of those things where people either love it or hate it. She loves it and is explaining why. Now, I'm briefly going to talk about colons. Even though it doesn't come up in the assignment, what happen is sometimes people get mixed up and start using them because they have very similar names, but they are a different type of punctuation and they get used very differently. So I did want to talk about them just so there's less confusion. How do we use colons in our writing? Okay, it has multiple reasons, which are all different than semicolons. The big one is you cannot use a colon to join sentences. It is not allowed to do that, okay? You can give emphasis to something in a sentence. You can use it to present dialogue. You can introduce lists or a longer quote from a text, or sometimes you could clarify complicated book or composition titles. So for example, I've got emphasis. He had only one goal, colon, the destruction of his enemies. It was her favorite holiday, colon, Christmas. The sound had haunted him throughout his dreams, colon, the memory of her screams. So when we're using it that way, if we wanted to, we could take the colon out and use a dash, okay? It's the same idea. It's kind of setting something off and showing you, hey, this part is important, okay? It's the same concept. Then we have certain types of dialogue. In plays or interviews or a podcast transcription, when they want to show who's talking, what they usually do is they put the person's name first, then the colon, and then their exact words. So here's an example from Goldilocks. No, Three Piggies. Piggy number 1, colon, no, you can't come in. Big bad wolf, colon, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow the house down. So unless you're writing a play, that's where you'd use a colon. If you are, great. We're not really doing that very often here, so you wouldn't use this very often. Here's another example where you see it in an interview. Here, Q stands for the person asking the question, and A stands for the answer. They've interviewed Chris Hadfield, who is a Canadian astronaut. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. The question says, what do you find scarier, launching a novel or launching into space? And Chris Hadfield answers, A, there's a a colon there. Things aren't scary. Just sometimes people are scared. Things are just things. Some people are terrified by small spaces, and some people are terrified by big spaces. Some people are terrified by a cat or a worm or whatever, but none of those things are scary. They might be dangerous, but whether you choose to be scared or not is personal. So again, in an interview, you might see the colon, and it's just trying to set things off, right? You might also see it introduce a list or text or tabular material. Like sometimes if you're making a big long quote, say from a play in Shakespeare or a longer quote from a chapter in somebody's book, rather than just putting quotation marks, you might set it off with a colon. Okay. Here's an example of a list. Here's what you need to bring to summer camp: colon, sunglasses, sunscreen, 5 pairs of shorts or pants, 5 t-shirts, 5 pairs of socks, 5 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of shoes, 1 that can get wet. Here's an example as tabbed material. So in the rectangle that I'm lighting up, this is a little excerpt from a very famous speech by Martin Luther King. So my intro says, Martin Luther King's most famous speech is known for this section, colon. Now, because this is a longer quote, we don't necessarily have quotation marks at the beginning and the end. I don't know when that became a convention, but it is a convention. So here it says, I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Now, sometimes we use it to clarify the titles in books, lectures, or compositions, and usually this is when There's a main title and then kind of like a subtitle. So here, if you look at this book, the main title says computer, but there's 1,000 computer books. So the subheading is A History of the Information Machine. Now, visually, on the actual cover, there's no colon because it's not needed. They made the word computer really big to show you it's the main title, and they made A History of the Information Machine really small to show you it's a subheading. But when you're trying to imitate that by typing, it's kind of hard to do. So what we do instead is we use a colon between the main heading and the subheading to show it. So computer, colon, A History of the Information Machine. All right. So now we're moving on to assignment 16. Here's my time. Yeah, I got a little bit of time left still. All right, so key question 16. Write a Facebook post responding or talking about any news event in your community or a surrounding area such as Sioux Lookout, Dryden, or Kenora. It could be about anything newsworthy. A fire, an accident, a death, a birth, a marriage. Oops, hang on a second, guys. Sorry. A new school, a special event or activity, or a social justice issue. It should be at least 6 sentences long. It can be longer if you need it to be, that's fine. We only want 2 semicolons. If you put semicolons in every single sentence, it is going to sound a little bit strange, okay? In your unit, you should have like a little fake template like this. Some people don't like to use this, that's fine. If you want to, you could get like a little ruler and draw yourself little lines to write on. And if you just want to do it on lined paper, that's fine too. It doesn't matter to me, okay? If you want it and you haven't got it, I will happily send it to you. Sorry, guys. My voice is going on me a little bit here. Okay. Oh, hang on. All right. My apologies, guys. I've got a little bit of a cold here. I'm fighting and starting to cough a bit. So for this assignment, I'm going to mark it according to the rubric, and I will show you the rubric on the next page. It's only worth 10 marks, okay? So 2 marks are going for your answer showing that you understand the question and the writing format. Another 2 marks goes to showing me that you know how to use semicolons. 3 marks is for your thinking, that you select relevant details, relevant information, it's suited to your purpose and suited to your audience. 2 marks for your communication skills, organization, fluency, clarity, tone and transitions, and then 1 mark for conventions. Conventions is spelling, grammar, capitalization, and punctuation, okay? So I know people always worry about spelling, but I don't give very many marks for spelling. We're not supposed to, really, okay? Your ideas are more important. Okay, so to think about, how is the format of a Facebook post different from a traditional paragraph? A lot of times, Facebook posts may be expressing ideas or opinions about a topic. A lot of times, the audience may also know about the topic or event. Now, sometimes they may be trying to inform people about that event or topic. Now, people generally are going to write in the first person point of view. I think that. I believe that. They may use emojis. They may use incomplete sentences. However, for the purpose of this assignment, please don't do that. I know it would be appropriate, but we're trying to practice writing incomplete sentences, so we're not going to do that. Last year, I gave people the choice between doing it as a journal or a Facebook post. However, this year I'm taking away that choice and just using it for a Facebook post because we need to do some media stuff. Try to remember the paragraph format or framework, your opinion on the topic, or your main idea about the topic. 4 to 6 sentences that show the reasons for your opinion or provide details about the event. And then wrap up your opinion on the topic or on the event in a new and interesting way. Which of these statements correctly describe the paragraph format? Any group of sentences based on a single topic? No. An opening sentence followed by 3 to 5 detail sentences that explain your ideas? No. An opening sentence that is supported by at least 3 to 5 sentences, wrapped up by a concluding sentence that restates the main topic? Yes. A half page of text regardless of how many sentences it has? No. I'm doing this because I get a lot of A, B, and D, but I'm looking for C. Okay? Sorry, guys. Quick reminder, this is the writing process. Now, for a short assignment, sometimes people want to skip the writing process. You don't need to skip it. You can just make each one shorter. Maybe your planning and brainstorming is like 1 to 2 minutes long. Okay? Maybe you write your rough draft in like 10 minutes. Maybe you do your revising in another 10 minutes. Then maybe you take another minute or two to do the editing. All told, you're still only looking at 20, 25 minutes. It's not very long, but you're going to get a better quality of work. Okay. Step 1 is either picking a topic that you've got a strong opinion on, or an event that you want to talk about. Like, let's say there's an upcoming sobriety walk that you want to talk about, or an upcoming feast, or you wanted to discuss, say, the hunting derby, or Christmas. Maybe there's something special that your group is doing. So it doesn't have to be a topic. It could be an informational one, but you have to be able to have enough to say about it, and you need to be able to think about, how am I going to write some semicolons into here, okay? Then once you got your brainstorming notes, take a few minutes and put together your rough draft. Then do some revisions. Okay. A lot of people get the revisions in the editing stage mixed up. A lot of people just skip over revising and go to editing, okay? Revising has major changes to the content, the length, the style, or the organization. Editing, there's no changes to the content, length, style, or organization. For revising, the focus is on improving the organization, the clarity, the style, the vocabulary, the length, the details, the examples. For editing, the focus is just on fixing little tiny errors, punctuation, capitalization, grammar, and spelling. If you're only doing editing, you're skipping this really, really important step. And this revising step, I find, is the one that makes the difference between getting a C or a B, or a B and an A. It generally, if you take a little bit of time doing revising, it improves your marks significantly. Okay. Now, sometimes people will tell me, well, I don't know how to revise, or I don't know what to revise. So here's kind of the steps to revision. First of all, check that you've followed the correct writing format, whatever you've picked. Remember, I haven't picked this, you pick it. But you have to be specific, like, are you describing something, or are you giving your opinion? Or are you telling a story? Read it out loud. I don't know why, but when you hear your own work out loud, all the mistakes become so much more obvious. Does it make sense? Is there information missing? Is there a word that doesn't quite match what you were trying to say? Have you duplicated words? Have you left out some words? Did you forget a step? Are things kind of out of order? This is probably the most important part. Make sure your work makes sense. A lot of times you may be visualizing it in your head and it's really clear in your head, but I can't read your mind. And I may not necessarily be seeing the same picture that you're seeing. So try to spend some time on that one. Does the length of the piece match the assignment? is it is significantly longer or way shorter than requested. If it's way too long, like if I ask for half a page and you've got 2 pages, you probably need to shorten some stuff, right? That's a little bit too much. But if I asked for a page and you've got 2 sentences, first of all, you need to do it because I'm going to hand it back and say, I'm sorry, I can't mark. This is just not enough there for me. Then check your vocabulary. Are you repeating certain words over and over? Like, for example, he was nice, it was nice, she was nice. Okay, well, let's get rid of the word nice. Let's use a different word. Are some of the words vague or unclear? Like tree. Well, what kind of tree? Are we talking about a jack pine or a poplar or a willow or an oak? Would some adjectives or some better nouns and verbs help paint a clearer picture to your audience? And then just look at your overall writing style. Do you need to increase the variety of sentence types or formats or lengths? Have you remembered to use transition or sequencing words? This is a great time to practice using those conjunctive adjectives if you want. How is the tone of the piece? Does it match your purpose and audience? Like, if you're writing to your mom, it's probably a lot different than how you would write to your best friend. If you're writing a Facebook post that you know everybody is going to read, that might have a very different tone than how you might write, again, to your best friend. Oh, I just noticed the time. I've got to wrap it up. All I was going to say next was just talking about some transition words, but we've talked about that before. And then when you're editing, make sure to look for spelling errors, capitalization errors, punctuation errors, and any grammar errors of the things we've talked about so far, okay? Other than that, we're good, and I will be back tomorrow talking about key question 17 and hopefully 18 if we have got time, okay? Take care and have a good night.